folks. I am Jacky Blisson, Master of Wine, speaking to you on behalf of Good Food Revolution. Today, I have the good fortune of chatting with Sam Millton from Millton Vineyards and Winery. So Millton is a couple years shy of your 50th anniversary. Established in 1984 by James and Annie Millton on the banks of the Tara River in the Gisborne region of New Zealand's North Island. This was land that was farmed by Annie's family for several generations. And James and Annie are real pioneers in the organic and biodynamic winemaking scene in New Zealand, but also in the crafting of orange wine. So Sam, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks, Jacky. It's nice to be here.
So when did you first start experimenting with extended skin contact for your white wines?
I think our first vintage was 2012 or 13. And the first one that we tried it with was Gewürztraminer. So
okay.
We've had it for quite a while, and it's kind of made sense to us. A lot of the time it was just clean and a little bit sweeter wine, and decided to a long extended skin contact for a bit more aromatics. But there's also been another variety, Muscat, that we've had for 30 years.
Okay.
And purely through the process of making it, we've had to do skin contact. So right from the early 90s, my dad was doing skin contact with that just for 3 days, just to break down the skin and the pulp. So it's been going for a while.
So the initial idea behind it, you're saying it was really just to draw out the aromatics, give a little bit more texture, and what sort of drove you to then extend this period of skin contact? Because you're pretty renowned for nowadays for wines that are on their skins for upwards of 200 days. Am I right?
Yeah, I'd say there's quite a lot of other people doing that, but we've actually been kind of pulling it back a little bit.
Okay.
Just to find... I've been learning that the variety kind of determines how long it likes to be on skins.
Okay.
Some things like Chenin Blanc, for instance, that we do on skins, it doesn't, for me, this is all just my personal views, but for me, the Chenin doesn't enjoy being on skins too long. Or on the other hand, varieties like Muscat, as I mentioned before, which has a lot more skin, a lot more phenolics, that kind of enjoys a shorter time as well. But then I've also got some Mitzvani, an old Georgian variety.
Okay.
That really enjoys being on skins for as long as you can be patient with it.
So when you say it enjoys being on skins, are you talking about a variety that's more or less phenolic and sort of takes on more structure, but without harshness?
Yeah, and just kind of monitoring the ferment. So, for instance, the Mitzvani, being Georgian, it was never really grown for clean press, clean white wines.
Right.
Until the kind of Soviet era happened and they were doing a lot of mass production there. Unlike other varieties that us and a lot of other Kiwis making of skin ferments with things like Chardonnay and Riesling, both of those for a long time have been grown and selected for making a clean, polished white wine, so not actually being grown and selected for skin ferment. Like the Georgian varieties, they've always just been around, and they've always just kind of been in the Quevries and actually have had time on skins. So they've kind of been selected for skin contact, unlike a lot of the French varieties that we have.
Right.
Kind of picked for the opposite.
Absolutely. What were the wines or the winemakers that really inspired you when you were when you were experimenting, when you were evolving your style of orange wines?
Well, there was one of the wines from Hawke's Bay, who isn't there anymore, but the guys who own Hastings Distillers.
Okay.
I can't remember the names. Might need to edit this bit out. But Beth and David from, David's French, Beth's Kiwi. They used to have a winery called Dada, and I remember back in 2007 or 8, they were making fully natural wines, skin ferments, and really amazing stuff. well before I knew of any of the Australians kind of really pushing that kind of area out. And yeah, I remember trying their wines a long time ago. I think that they would be incredible, but not really understanding any of it.
Did you like them?
Yeah, yeah. Thankfully, they've still got some wines available at the moment that I get to enjoy. They're a bit more cleaner ones than they used to have, but yeah. And then I think after that, biggest influence was probably my sister, because she was living in Adelaide Hills, which is one of the huge spots for making really beautiful natural wines. So between getting to try it not too far from home and seeing what's happening overseas, it's really good insight.
You're talking about the fact that you went from sort of the earliest skin contact whites that you were making. It was 3 days maybe on their skins, and then slowly over time you've moved up to 30 days maybe, and then longer periods of time, to a point where some of the wines in the last couple of years were upwards of 200 days, and now you're saying you're pulling back on that. Obviously, as you mentioned, dependent on grape variety, dependent on style. But how long has this period sort of been where you've been sort of playing with the lengths and the durations and what you're getting from them?
Well, I'd say it's probably like most Kiwis at the moment, who are just kind of figuring out their own, what the grapes like that they grow, and also figuring out their own technique. Because for me, the orange ones, mostly it's just a technique that we like to use. Like if you're in a kitchen, there'll be some techniques you use for certain cuts of meat or certain vegetables. It's just how you can get the best flavor out of it without being there for the stylistic reason. And so we've been spending the last 10 years really figuring out what variety likes what process. And whereas I said before, we're pulling back to shorter days on skins. Those ones are for like more vibrant and fresher kind of wines, but we're also going to the complete opposite end of, in the middle of harvest, I'll open up a few heads in the barrel. Me and Tim, our winemaker, will fill up about halfway with whole bunches, put that back on, fill it up with juice, and leave that there for about 300 days. Okay. So we're actually, it's kind of the middle that we're dropping out, that 1 or 2 months. That's where we find the two things that our grapes enjoy the most: either a really extreme length, which it goes from being an orange wine, and then after about 150 days, it comes back down to being a really rich and textural white wine without having too much cloudiness. And then we have like the 5 days on skins for a really vibrant and fruity kind of orange wine.
You get more fruit forward style. And how if you also run a deli and a wine shop in Gisborne, right? Yeah,
a little bar.
Very cool.
It's just a little 20-seater spot. I only have the criteria that all the wines have to be organic or biodynamic.
Okay.
Usually not have to be certified, because a lot of the Italian and Spanish wines together would have been organic long before certification really around. But it's quite nice just trying to, I suppose, broaden the horizon of Gisborne wine.
But that also, I imagine, lets you gauge consumer perception to all these different styles of wine. And have you found in New Zealand, the average consumer, their perception of orange wine has changed over the years? Are they more familiar? Are they more willing to embrace white wines with a phenolic edge to them?
Yeah, a lot of people are pretty open to orange wine. I think especially in Gisborne, which New Zealand's quite isolated, and being in Gisborne is even more isolated. We're like, Gisborne is to New Zealand what New Zealand is to the world. We've got to the south and to the west. So really isolated here, and it's a lot slower. It's a lot slower take up to orange wines, but I get quite a few people coming in and asking about them. Or it's just people more so are asking for natural wine rather than orange wine. But a lot of it's been quite nice. It's been reaffirming that the wines are quite delicious and people enjoy them rather than the winemaker driving it. It's kind of both parties.
Absolutely. And how do you find, so we were talking about the evolution in your style of orange wine, but are there things going forward that you're interested in experimenting with, either in terms of different grapes you'd like to try out or different vessels you'd like to be fermenting? And I know you're using large neutral barrels as well as some amphora in your mix and stainless steel. Is there anything that you're thinking of experimenting with?
Well, I think I've done my time with the amphora. I think.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, I think that they make beautiful wine, but at the same time, I think just for the grapes that we've got here and the climate that we've got, I think they need more of that neutral wood, just a lot more of that micro oxygenation in it.
Right.
It's also just the user friendliness, where a barrel I can roll around on the concrete, I can put a washer in it. The amphora, me and Tim are always quite scared that we're going to break
Very
it.
fragile and hard to source, I imagine, as well.
And so barrel, you know, we can rough handle it, and it's just, for me, if ever there's anything wrong with the wine, look at it, look after it, and then throw it into a barrel and leave it in a barrel for a couple of months, and it always comes up beautiful. But it's kind of just like, for me, to not fix what isn't broken.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other one is, hopefully I can save up and get myself some large format oaks, because I think doing that fermentation that I mentioned before of opening up the barrel and putting whole bunches in, that would be really nice to try with large format oak.
When you say large format, what are you thinking?
Like it'd be nice if I had like some 2 or 4 hectoliter foudres. Just in that volume, the wine stays a lot more protected rather than a 300 litre barrel. And it can just be kept hygienic a lot easier without having to manipulate it, but it's just the sheer volume of it is just a lot safer.
Absolutely. When you're looking at the terroir where you're working, you're talking about the climate factors and the terroir factors. Have you noticed that there's certain parts of the vineyard, certain of your 3 sites that are really lend themselves to ripening the grapes in such a way that they sort of earmarked for orange wines?
Yeah, I think because our largest productions that we have is mostly Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, and what we'll do is go through and do a clean pick and then follow right afterwards just for the general pick, because all of our sorting gets done in the vineyard. So it's usually the older vines. So some of our oldest vines got to about 40, but we've got quite a large portion of them that are about 30. And so usually we'll try and make orange wines with the older vines because they've just got better maturity for the phenolic ripening, and just their roots are a lot deeper into the soil, so you can get a bit more of that terroir and just
a bit more concentrated flavors, I imagine.
Yeah, and we keep all of the young plants that we've, for less than 8 years, we'll leave just to keeping somewhat traditional, either straight pressing or just not making for that. Still trying to make it as nice as we can, but giving the old vines their time to shine.
Absolutely. And are there other newcomers on the scene in New Zealand making nice orange wines that you sort of compare your wines with, benchmark against, chat with about techniques? And
yeah, there's plenty of them. One of my mates down in North Canterbury, Will, he started his new wines Vita, as well as the winery that works at Black Estate. They've always been my favourites for a long time. As well as in Hawke's Bay, heaps of new people came out there. There's Amois and the Halcyon Days, plenty of people down in Central Otago, and there's a huge, I think it's kind of it hasn't taken off like it has in Australia with the big explosion. I think it's a lot of people over the last 5 years of dipping their toes in the water, And then after that, there's been a few people behind them that have just gone and fully committed. And so now I think we're getting to that stage where there's quite a few wineries that they only make natural wines, which I think is quite nice. It's just to be fully committed to it. It's where I'd like to change the winery to.